Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Ukraine during the previous 12 hours. Zelensky made lots of very interesting statements revealing the current political situation. Zelensky stated that there is a possibility of signing documents between America and Russia. Intelligence is aware of the Dmitriev package. The volume of the economic cooperation package between America and Russia is about $12 trillion. At the same time, there are signals in the media that these agreements may contain issues related to Ukraine, in particular its sovereignty and security. Ukraine will not support any decisions or agreements about itself that are made without its participation. Ukraine will not support agreements that contradict the constitution of Ukraine and Ukrainian legislation. So that was stated Zelensky, and most likely he was talking about updates and articles that were published yesterday. The US wants to conclude a peace deal in Ukraine in March and hold elections in May, but this is unlikely. That was stated by Reuters. These deadlines will likely be pushed back due to the lack of a territorial compromise. Kiev rejects the agreement until security guarantees from the United States and other countries are approved. There is no agreement on Donetsk and the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. So these are the statements of Zelensky, and this is the reality, but Zelensky is trying to tell us that most likely the United States of America and the Russian Federation may sign agreements without the participation of Ukraine, and they will try to force Ukraine to accept the reality. But Zelensky is saying that he's not going to do this. And all these things are happening at the same time with the failed assassination attempt that took place 3 days ago in the territory of Moscow. I would like to remind you that first deputy chief of the GRU, General Alexeyev, was attacked in Moscow. An unknown assailant fired several shots into the back of the lieutenant general on Volokholamsk highway and fled the scene. Alexeyev was hospitalized. According to information we have, the lieutenant general managed to survive. Everything is okay with him. He is in Moscow. But today, this morning, we received a shocking report published by the FSB. The FSB, together with the Ministry of Internal Affairs, has identified the perpetrator and accomplices of the assassination attempt on General Alexeyev, according to the FSB Public Relations Center. The immediate perpetrator was Russian citizen Korba. He was detained with the assistance of partners from the United Arab Emirates and handed over to Russia. Another important detail, his accomplices were Russians, Vasin and Serebrytskaya. Vasin was detained in Moscow and Serebrytskaya fled to Ukraine. So this is probably the most important part. So according to these statements, one of the as one of the accomplices fled to Ukraine. The Russians most likely will never be able to capture her, but the Russians continue the searches for the organizers of the assassination attempt. So we see that more and more signals are telling us that Ukraine partially or was involved into the situation. As of now, we don't have 100% proofs, but if Russia are able to confirm this, and if Russia is able to prove this situation, then of course these proofs would be handed over to the United States of America, and this could be a base for complete collapse of talks between Russia and Ukraine, and Russia and the United States of America will sign every single paper they need to continue cooperation. So this is the reality, and this is the thing that is happening. The Ukrainians and Zelensky himself understands the situation, so that is why the Ukrainians are planning to increase forces in coming days, and they will strengthen the mobilization process. Today we received the report that Ukraine's new defense minister Mikhail Fedorov has authorized recruiters to use combat weapons as a part of forced mobilization. This is probably the most important update for people and for citizens of Ukraine. Furthermore, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Syrsky, stated that additional battalions of unmanned aerial vehicles will be added to the staff of separate assault regiments. We also continue to strengthen the unmanned component in the territorial defense forces brigades. Later, before he emphasized that the Russians will increase the number of drone forces by 79,000 in 2026. So we see that nobody is going to stop this war, the special military operation, the conflict on the territory of Ukraine will continue, and most likely the parties have begun the preparation before very difficult spring and summer military campaigns. Now let's discuss the situation on the front lines. We received lots of important updates. The sources are saying that the Ukrainians during the previous night attacked two cities of the Russian Federation. The Ukrainians attacked this Bryansk region with Neptune and HIMARS missiles, disrupting power supply in 7 municipalities and injuring people. We had the report that Ukrainians also attacked the city of Belgorod. Here we can see the moments when HIMARS missile attack the substation, a substation around the city. So here we can see the moments when HIMARS system explode. So according to information we have, there are power outages on the territory of the city of Belgorod, and that there was a blackout during the night. So the situation remains tense, and all these attacks obviously will force the Russians in coming days to carry out another massive missile and drone attack through the entire territory of Ukraine, and most likely the Russians will try to destroy another power station, or they will try to destroy the substations that connects the territory of Ukraine with Europe, with the purpose to cut energy supply of Ukraine from the Western countries. As for this situation, we have a very interesting report that these days Ukrainians have just 1 or 2 hours of electricity during the day, which obviously is a very, very difficult situation when there is such a bad weather outside the buildings. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first let's talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction. We have already started discussion in this area, and according to information we have, the armed forces of Ukraine began a counteroffensive operation. I would like to remind you that yesterday several pro-Ukrainian sources stated that Ukrainians began a counter-offensive operation in the direction of the settlements by the name of Zlagada, and Ukrainians counter-attacked in the direction of the settlement of Kalinovskaya. Furthermore, pro-Ukrainian sources stated that as a result of these fast lightning attacks, the Ukrainians managed to enter both villages, and the Ukrainians either have already secured these territories, these two villages, or about to do this. As of different pro-Russian sources and more details, we don't know for sure whether this information is correct. Maybe this is just speculation or a pure propaganda with the purpose to force the Russians and pro-Russian sources to think that something is happening in this area. But at the same time, yesterday we received a report published by a pro-Russian source, and they stated and they confirmed that at the same time the Ukrainians significantly increased its activity in the north, conducting 4 attacks by individual units of the 425th Separate Rifle Regiment and 92nd Separate Brigade, and the sources are saying that Ukrainians are using vehicles to carry out these attacks. Another important thing is that during the previous months, let's say since the beginning of December, we received lots of updates from the, let's say, central part of the Gulay-Polye direction. For example, this video was published on the 27th of January, and here we can see how the Russians were attacking forces of the armed forces of Ukraine, so just several days ago, somewhere in these fields. This video, for example, was published on the 3rd of February. Here we can see almost the same story. The Russians were attacking forces of the armed forces of Ukraine in these fields. Based on this video, we didn't adjust the map because lots of reliable sources stated that those were something like sabotage and reconnaissance groups of the armed forces of Ukraine. So that is why we decided to wait a bit more to understand what is happening here. But now we see the entire picture. It seems that somehow the Ukrainians found a solution how to break through Russian defense and how to infiltrate their units in these fields, trying to attack Russian positions along these yellow lines. And there are lots of Ukrainian soldiers in these fields, despite the fact that most of the mappers show these territories as the territories under complete control of the armed forces of the Russian Federation. So everything is pretty complicated in this region, and the Ukrainians intensified their offensive operation right after the moments of the great disconnect, when the Russians were completely cut off from the Starlink system. Furthermore, I would like to remind you that several days ago, several neutral experts reported that the Russians dropped their significantly their offensive operations in this area. It seems that the Russians are regrouping, and it seems that the Russians are waiting for the Ukrainians and for their counterattacks. So when talking about these things, it seems that Ukrainians first of all are trying to create breaches in the Russia's defense and to cut this territory into several smaller pieces and then to handle with every single piece separately. Let's wait and see, of course, what is going to happen within the next days, but summarizing everything, we can say that currently the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine started or launched up to from 2 to 3 counterattacks. The Zaporizhzhia counteroffensive, and we start receiving more details about the situation these days, and the Ukrainians launched the Barova counteroffensive operation to the south of the city of Kupiansk. We will discuss this in a minute. So as of this area, during the previous 12 hours, we received lots of updates of how Russians were bombing concentration of the armed forces of Ukraine forces in this area, and the author of this video claims that the temporary deployment points were attacked, and we started receiving videos of how Russians began attacking with FPV drones units and forces of the armed forces of Ukraine to the south of the river of Volcha. So as you can see, it seems that Ukrainians began counterattacks from the settlement of Pokrovsky in the southern direction, and several units of the armed forces of Ukraine were attacked along these lines of attacks. So let's wait and see what is going to be next, but obviously if the Ukrainians indeed launched a counter-offensive operation in this region, pro-Ukraine mappers sooner or later will adjust their maps, and sooner or later we will start receiving more videos and updates about the situation in this direction. Now let's talk about the Dobropolye direction. During the previous 12 hours, we received interesting updates. First, the video along M30 road. Here we can see how Ukrainians destroyed the bridge along M30 road. Very interesting video. The author of this video stated that the Ukrainians destroyed the bridge along the road that the Russians were using for their logistic purposes, but most of the mappers show these territories located under complete Ukraine control. So which means we believe that Ukrainians destroyed the bridge because the Ukrainians are planning to retreat from this area further in the western and the northwestern direction. So it seems that in coming hours we will have additional changes. Furthermore, the Russians continue encircling the city of Belitska on the Dobropolye direction, and these are the changes on the ground between the previous dates. According to pro-Russian sources, the armed forces of the Russian Federation managed to cuts the southwestern part of the settlement. This information was confirmed by pro-Russian sources. The Ukrainians are trying to counterattack in this area, but everything that entered this territory is destroyed and attacked by Russians. So the battle for Belitska has begun, as we understand, and most likely the Russians will try to continue offensive operation, and in coming days we will receive additional updates. As for the Konstantinovka direction, nothing during the previous 12 hours. As for the Slaviansk direction, during the previous 12 hours, we received huge changes. So this is the situation by the end of the 7th of February. This is the beginning of the 8th of February. As you can see, the Russians improved their position significantly along MO3 road, and the Russians are about to finish the battle for the first defense layer. And the Russians, as you can see, continue improving their positions along the second defense layer in front of the settlement of Alexandrovka. So the Russians are advancing, the Russians are keeping advancing. We see that the Ukrainians are not holding their lines, and the Ukrainians retreating further in the northwestern direction. The same thing is happening in the territory to the west of the city of Seres. These are the changes on the ground, and this report was confirmed by pro-Russian sources. So according to these updates, the Russians are about to establish complete control over the settlement of Riznikovka, and most likely this is happening due to the situation that Ukrainians are losing control over the strategic hills located along the Seversky Donetsk River in the direction of Kriva Luka. So it seems that the front line, the defenses of the armed forces of Ukraine in this area are collapsing, and most likely Ukrainians would be forced to fall back further in the western direction, trying to stick as close as possible to this huge forest, the settlement of Alexandrovka and the settlement of Nikolaevka. The Liman direction, nothing. The Barova direction, once again, several sources stated that the Ukrainians began a counter-offensive operation in this region, and during the previous days we received first updates. As for this direction, the Ukrainians have just one and simple task. They are trying to establish complete control over this yellow line and to connect the northern Kupiansk direction with this central Kupiansk direction or the Barova direction. This will allow the Ukrainians to improve their logistic and to win some time during the battle for the river Voskol, because the Russians, despite the fact that as a result of the Ukrainian counteroffensive lost some positions on the territory of the city of Kupiansk, the Russians finished regrouping and they began counteroffensive operation. And for example, during the previous night, the map has been adjusted once again. These are the changes on the ground, and we made these adjustments based on this video published by pro-Ukrainian sources. Here we can see how Ukrainians were attacking positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in the northern part of the city of Kupiansk. Based on this video, we have adjusted the map. So we see that the Russians began restoring control over the territories they lost during the Ukrainian counteroffensive operation. So that is why it is very important for Ukrainians to once again restore control over the territory between the villages of Novoplatonovka, Boguslavka, Zagryzovka, Kruglyakivka and Kolesnikovka. As for the most northern directions, during the previous 12 hours, additional changes were recorded in the Volchansk direction. The Russians continue clashes for the territory to the south of the settlement of Gravskaya. A few, let's say, square kilometers of the village of Gravskaya were taken. The Russians are keeping advancing, and in coming days, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation most likely will confirm control over this territory. As for the Sumy direction, during the previous night, we haven't received anything special. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye-bye.